Now going to move over to Adi Abulafia. Everybody, Adi is an ophthalmologist who's a consultant in Jerusalem. He's head of the cataract service there, and he's president of our sister organization, the Israeli Cataract Society. So it's an absolute delight to introduce Adi to you. And Adi's going to continue the theme, talking more about lens calculations, a little bit more about toricity. Adi, over to you.
Okay, so thank you so much for inviting me and for the kind introduction. It's a really great honor to be here. So I'm going to talk today about correcting astigmatism. So my financial disclosure can be seen at the bottom of the slide. And so corneal astigmatism is a common condition. And if we look at the large database, it shows that more than half of the eyes have 0.75 diopters of total corneal astigmatism or more. So actually the amount of cataract patients that might benefit from astigmatism correction is huge. And toric IOLs are gradually becoming the standard of care for these patients. But as we all know, the refractive results following their implantations are not always predictable. So this evening, I would like to share with you 8 tips for improving your toric IOL outcomes. So the first tip is to validate your data and to look at the corneal topography. And this was covered beautifully by Doug. So data validation is the fundamental requirement for accurate measurements. So make it a common practice to look at the raw data and to evaluate the actual quality of your measurements. And it's important to perform corneal topography for these patients to verify that the Meyer rings looks okay and that we are dealing with symmetric and regular astigmatism. Now, the next step is to diagnose and to treat any pre-existing ocular surface disorders, since corneal measurements in these eyes might be unreliable. So let's look at these 3 examples. So here is corneal topographies of a patient with dry eyes before and after a course of steroid drops and artificial tears. And this is a patient with map dot fingerprint dystrophy before and after superficial keratectomy. And another patient before and after pterygium removal. So let's move to the next tip, and the next tip is to use several measuring devices. So there are many devices using different technologies to measure the corneal astigmatism. And when we use several measuring devices, it might keep us safe in case that one device will get it wrong. So my advice to you is, if possible, use at least 3 measuring devices for this task. But however, measurements by 3 or more devices will typically produce 3 or more different values. So now you need to decide which values to use. Now you can either use your own clinical judgment, or another and easier alternative is to use a software that will automatically generate it for you, such as the K-calculator feature on the Barrett Online Toric Calculator. Now moving to the next tip is to take into account the posterior corneal astigmatism. And today it's a common knowledge that standard keratometry and topography machines tend to yield inaccurate results in assessing the total corneal astigmatic power. What they do, they measure the anterior corneal curvature, and they assume that there is a fixed ratio between the anterior and the posterior surfaces of the cornea, which we know is not correct, mainly thanks to Doug. So we know that most of the posterior corneas are steep along the vertical meridian, and we also know that the posterior cornea acts like a minus lens. So it will produce a positive refractive astigmatism effect along the horizontal meridian. Now, in order to make our life more simple, we tend to say that it reduces the total corneal astigmatism in eyes with with the rule astigmatism and increases it in eyes with against the rule astigmatism. But the reality is slightly more complex than that, because both the anterior and the posterior surfaces of the cornea contribute to the total corneal astigmatism power, which has its own magnitude and own meridian. Now, ignoring the posterior corneal astigmatism effect will typically lead to against the rule errors in the predicted refractive astigmatism. And basically 2 approaches have been taken to address this issue. The first, improved mathematical methods that are based on anterior corneal measurements, and the ultimate goal, direct measurements of the posterior cornea. So here you can see again the against the rule prediction errors using standard anterior corneal measurements. And this is how it looks after applying a mathematical model. Now, many of us use mathematical models in our daily practice. Some are fully integrated, like the Barrett with a toric calculator, while others are available as an on and off option. But the problem with mathematical approaches for selecting toric IOLs is scatter, since there's a wide individual variation even in so-called normal corneas. So ideally, we should measure the posterior cornea directly. But if we look at the current literature, it seems that mathematical models are more accurate as compared to direct measurements of the total corneal astigmatic power. And even intraoperative aberrometry seems to be no better than the mathematical models. So why is it so hard to measure the posterior cornea? Well, the small difference in the refractive index between the posterior cornea and the aqueous makes it a tough surface to identify and to quantify. And there's really no gold standard to validate our measurements. But can it be that there is another reason why the mathematical models outperform direct measurements? Well, one possible explanation is that many of the mathematical models do not account only for the posterior corneal astigmatism effect. Rather, most of them are designed to account for the differences between the anterior-based corneal measurements and the post-op refraction. So they might include other factors affecting the refractive outcome. Factors such as physiological IOL tilt or decentration. So let's look under the hood of one of the mathematical models, the Abulafia-Koch formula. Now, it was designed as an add-on feature for standard toric calculators in order to compensate for the differences between the anterior corneal astigmatism and the total astigmatism of the pseudophakic eye. It is based on two separate linear regressions for calculating the X and Y components of the estimated total astigmatism using anterior corneal measurements. And as you can notice, the correlations for these two components were extremely high. And here you can see three examples for the preoperative anterior corneal astigmatism and the estimated astigmatism that should be corrected for each eye by the Abulafia-Koch formula. Now, as you can notice, both the magnitude and the meridian values are adjusted by the formula. And now that you know how mathematical models work, you can easily understand why one should never use standard mathematical models with total corneal measurements. And this is because you are going to account for the same problem twice and you are going to get it wrong. Now, the next tip is to be alert for the unusual corneas. Now, unusual corneas like keratoconus, post-refractive eyes might present unusual ratio between the anterior and the posterior corneal surfaces. However, standard mathematical models are not designed to account for that. So the best available solution for these patients might be either to use total corneal measurements with standard toric calculators, or another alternative is to use the Barrett toric calculator with direct measurements of the posterior cornea. And for post-refractive eyes, you can use the Barrett-Ruquet toric calculator, which incorporates a specific mathematical model for these corneas. This was covered by Doug as well. Now, it is worth mentioning that recently a mathematical model was added for the post-refractive eyes in the EVO toric calculator, and that a mathematical model for eyes with keratoconus was added for the Kane toric calculator. Now, what about the corneal SIA? Should we use a fixed ratio for our corneal SIA? So should we use 0.5, 0.25, maybe 0? Or should we calculate our own personal corneal SIA? And the answer to these questions is not so simple as one might think. Now, in order to perform an ideal personal corneal SIA calculation, one should use consistent location and wound architecture for the main incision, to use measuring devices with high repeatability and accuracy, to use centroid value for the analysis, and to have a long-term follow-up. And ideally, we should perform an additional subgroup analysis in order to estimate the effect of the incision location proximity to the steep meridian and for different magnitudes of corneal astigmatism. And this is quite a tedious task. Now, here you can see my personal corneal SIA values with the Lenstar device. They came out as 0.07 diopters for the right eyes and 0.08 for the left eyes. Now, I did a repeated analysis for the same eyes, but using the IOL Master 700, and it came out very similar. And the same goes for the total keratometry. Now, the best way, I think, is to calculate your own SIA, but as I mentioned before, this is quite tedious and not always possible or feasible in all the clinical practices. So I think that a reasonable compromise would be to use consistent corneal incisions with low corneal SIA values, somewhere between 0 and 0.2 diopters. So moving to the next tip is to have a low threshold for performing toric IOL calculations. Now, in our daily practice, we are used to look at the spherical equivalent prediction given by each formula for a given IOL, but ideal printout should include complete predicted refraction. And some biometers have this option, but usually it comes only for the toric IOLs. So let's have a look at this example. This patient has about 0.6 diopters of against the rule corneal astigmatism. Now, instead of beating our heads trying to figure out whether this patient would benefit from a toric IOL implantation, you can simply use a modern toric calculator to look what would be the predicted post-op residual astigmatism for a non-toric IOL. Now, in this case, the patient will probably end up with about 1 diopter of residual refractive astigmatism, and this information can help you to decide whether you would prefer to implant a toric IOL or not. Now, the last tip is to optimize your toric IOL alignment. So we all know that proper toric IOL alignment is important for optimizing our post-op refractions. And though most of us use manual reference marking, which are quite accurate, it seems like computer-assisted marking have a small advantage over manual marking. And one elegant and potentially even more accurate alternative is to use a femtolaser to create permanent capsular axis landmarks. And this is how it looks. Now, each one should try and to find out his own preferred technique in order to achieve consistent toric IOL alignment. But no matter which technique you use, I urge you to meticulously aspirate the OVD behind the toric lens in order to reduce the chance for post-op IOL rotation. So these were my 8 tips for improving your toric IOL outcomes, and I hope that you will find them useful. Thank you very much.
Adi, that was really useful. I found that really a very in-depth and very deep understanding of all that. Can you just what effect do you think age has on the SIA? You know, older corneas react differently to younger corneas. Do you think that has an effect?
Well, it might have, and I don't have a good answer for that. I can tell you that I tried on my own data set to find a correlation between the SIA and age, and I didn't find one. But it doesn't mean that somebody else can, somebody else can find it, but I couldn't find it.
Okay, that's great. Okay, well, thank you very much, Eddie. That's a really good. We'll have some more questions at the end.